My name is Crystal Brown, and I'm one of the co-founders of Korero Solutions. Today, I'm joined by my co-partner, Jeanette Bordeaux. So we will be answering some questions for you today. Earlier this week, when we put out the chat or the announcement for this, I asked you, what questions do you have? What are those burning things that you need to get answered? Situations that are happening in the workplace right now. We just started our Skool community on Monday. Thank you so far for everyone that has joined us. And I'll drop the link in the chat here shortly. Let us know if you need that link. I'll put it in there. Join us in there to get your answers to these burning questions that you have. So often we hear people are suffering in silence, in frustration, or just the lack of confidence that happens when you're faced with workplace dynamics, with those interpersonal situations that are coming up, and you think, okay, what I'm doing isn't working. What do I do now? So instead of waiting days, weeks, sometimes months, like we've heard people are waiting for answers to these questions. Our Skool community, Jeanette and I will be active in there every single week, aiming for every single day so we can answer these questions for you, right? Get you back on the right track. All right, we're going to get started with some of the pre-submitted questions today. Again, if you have more, drop them in the chat and we will get to those as we move through. All right, our first one here is my team member swears constantly in the office, and I'm not sure how to address it. This creates a really uncomfortable environment for me, but I don't want to offend anyone since it seems to be part of the culture here. It's especially problematic because I'm already dealing with conflict with a toxic coworker, and the negative language is making everything feel even more hostile. How do I navigate this without seeming uptight or making things worse? All right, Jeanette, over to you.
Okay, that's a big question with multi levels on it. So I'm going to have to assume that the person that they're having a conflict with is somebody else other than the person that's swearing in the office. Now, I think if we go back 20, 30 years to what the culture was in a lot of offices, construction zones, workplaces, language and certain material seem to be the norm. And luckily, we've evolved, and a lot of those bad habits or untasteful habits are now no longer considered, valid in the workplace. But along with that, you've got staff that have been brought up, worked their whole time in that environment. And so they felt that, using foul language, if nobody says anything, everybody must be okay with it. If you have a team of 10 and the manager is one of the ones that uses the foul language and nobody says anything and a couple of the other staff do, they make a quick assumption that everybody is still okay with it. So, quick answer for you is to first find out if your relationship is one with this coworker that you feel you could go for a coffee with, a walk with. Like, what do they do when they get up from their desk? See if you can join them. My suggestion is in a casual environment, try to have that conversation with them to say, like when I hear you use and be specific with the word, like, do they use 10 different swear words or is it one constantly that really gets under your skin? Mention to them when you use this term, it really makes me uncomfortable. So I'm just wondering, is there something I can help you, to bring this to a more of an awareness piece? So the very first thing I hope in any time you're feeling uncomfortable in the workplace is that you're able to have a conversation in a casual environment and to bring up to them what it is to make sure that there is awareness of what they're doing. A lot of times employees go through, their day thinking that they were a stellar employee Meanwhile, they offended two, three people. But if people do not use their voice to let them know this, they have no way of knowing. So when they're formally disciplined, like if you go straight to the formal route, sometimes these people are shocked, saying, had I known that offended the person, I wouldn't have used the term. So make sure that they are aware of what they're saying, what the impact is on you, and what can you do together to try to stop it going forward. I hope that answers it. If it's your boss, it's a little bit different of an answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Yeah, I think this is something I know Jeanette has spoken about situations like this before, where she's come up with some very creative, or I guess worked with teams to come up with some very creative solutions, right? So identifying, like she was saying, is it one person? Is it a bigger cultural thing? Is it your boss? Um, we can help you create solutions for all of these, right? It's not always cut and dry. So yeah, that nuance, I think, is really important. All right, we have another question here. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Um, it is I have an employee who constantly interrupts me in meetings and talks over my ideas, but she's worked there for so long, even before I was hired. When I try to step in, she makes it seem like I'm being overly aggressive and don't listen. This is affecting my authority with my team. I've spoken to her about it privately, but she doesn't seem to see it as an issue. How do I handle this without looking petty or creating more drama?
So I'm assuming by this question, if the person's like still online, if you can ask them, it sounds like that they're the manager, because when you said the term that I've spoken to them about this, um, so I'm going to use it from the direction that you're the manager and you're being interrupted in a meeting. So the format that we put forward to do a meeting, just so that, because if they're shutting you down, they're shutting down the other team members in the meeting. Now, sometimes this is done without any ill intent, but if you ever watch extroverts in a meeting, some of the extreme extroverts, they're just all up in everything. They're answering questions, they're making judgments, they're shutting people down. So they're not doing that to be mean spirited or anything like that. That's just the way, the higher end extroverts react. Introverts will pull back, and that's why you've probably been asked to be more assertive in meetings. The way to head off, whether people are introverts or extroverts, and ensure that people feel heard in a meeting, is to use the collaboration model, where when you propose an idea, an item, a topic for discussion, you do a random call out, or you go left to right and call people to the table, and that's their time to speak, uninterrupted, no judgments. So, however you do it, allow it. If at the end, you've got time within your agenda, you can ask for people's rebuttal, but making sure that you let people know we're going to go a different method. And that way, when you speak, it's uninterrupted. When the one that's really assertive, aggressive, and interrupting speaks, they have their time. It'll take a little bit if this has been a behavior and a practice that's been allowed. They're going to, maybe take offense to it in the first couple, but then they'll start to see the value when they start to hear people who may have not spoken before in the meetings start speaking now.
Perfect. All right. That was great, Jeanette. I think, yeah, it sounds like calling in, right? Instead of calling out that individual, which seems to be that knee jerk reaction. How do you get everyone involved? All right. Like I was saying before, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Jeanette is here to try to give you those answers. We will move on to our next question here. So, my director keeps giving me feedback that I need to be more assertive and speak up more. For context, this is coming from a female. But every time I do, I get shut down or my ideas get dismissed. I feel like I'm getting mixed messages and I'm starting to doubt myself. I care about doing good work, but I'm confused about what they actually want from me. How do I figure out what's actually going on?
Hmm. Okay. So a lot of times our leaders talk about, because they've taken training and they'll be told, you have to be a good listener. So here's how you're an active listener. And if you do the collaboration, you're always tasked for opinions. The problem is they don't really know how to listen. They don't know how to actively listen. So even though they're asking you for your opinion, in their mind, they're already processing something different. So you're going to have to teach them how to actively listen to what you're saying. And you can respectfully say, excuse me, you asked me for my opinion on this. I'm just wondering, what did you hear me say so far? What that does is, it doesn't say, hey, you asked my opinion, but you really don't want it, and call them out completely. You're giving them an opportunity to actually sit back and think, you know what, I didn't hear that. So you might have to go into these conversations as the more skilled person. And when they ask a question, say, well, I want your opinion on this, and you've prepared, just reflect back and say, so what have you heard from me so far? And how does that align with what your thoughts are on this decision making? So you get them to tie it into what's a priority for them to what you've just stated is a priority for you. If they're kind of like looking like a deer in the headlights, that they kind of missed everything that you had to say, just give them the opportunity and say, you know what, I'll go through this again because I think it's really important for me to assist you in understanding where I'm coming from on this, and give them the second opportunity to hear again. If you start to use this mechanism of asking them what they heard that's important to you, they will start to realize when they ask you for an answer, they're going to have to pay attention. If you go into their office and they're sitting there asking you and they're typing on their keyboard or they're sending a message, just ask them if coming back at a later time when they can spend a bit more attention to what you have to say, just bring that to a conscious awareness again. So I would just say have them reflect back, and that way you can help them understand there may not be as an active listener as they possibly think they are. And there's lots of them out there.
So, Jeanette, I think a lot of people get trapped in this like, am I being assertive or am I being too aggressive? Like what makes it that I'm being too pushy
Yeah.
versus like how would you say to approach striking that balance?
And that's a great question because people do use aggressive in the wrong context. As soon as somebody gets excited or their emotions start to rise, and your voice may get a little bit louder, your tone will get a little bit higher. They say that that's aggressive behavior. That's actually assertive behavior. When you stand up and you're clear and concise as to what you want. I say aggressive behavior comes when you don't um, you're in somebody's face, so I'm leaning towards you and I'm not giving you your personal space. Spit's coming flying out of my mouth and it's ending up on you somewhere. I'm using derogatory language to you. I am at the point of not just raising my voice and my tone, but it's actually just about to the point of screaming or hollering. So it's something where when you think of, okay, how do I determine if I'm speaking to somebody just a little bit loud?
Mhm.
Well, can the people within 5 feet hear every word that you're saying? Then your voice is too loud. Because most people are working in more of an open environment these days. So if somebody within a 5 feet radius can hear what you're saying, you are speaking too loud. If the whole office can hear you, that's actually assertive language. But when you look at certain cultures, some cultures speak extremely loud and really close face to face. I'll use the Italian culture because they all agree that this is it. And I've watched some of the conversations, and after I'm like, wow, what were you guys arguing about? They said, arguing? We were just asking how each other's family was doing. And I said, well, that seems pretty like in your face aggressive. And they're like, no, 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 that's just how Joe is. So in some cultures, even though you speak louder, closer, and the spit is flying, it's okay. It's not seen as offensive. Most times, how you can draw the fast, hard line in the grass or in the sand is, are they using derogatory personal comments to you? So if I said to you, Crystal, well, that was a really stupid thing you did. How stupid are you? Now that's becoming assertive because I'm attacking you as a person. I've left the problem to the side.
Yeah,
And
that's moving into that aggression, right? Leaving that
absolutely.
assertiveness behind.
Yeah. But if I say to you, Crystal, come on, how did you do this? You got to show
Mhm,
me how. That can be seen as assertive. Now, you might think, ooh, she's speaking loud to me.
mhm,
It really, because, let's say, because of your past, if anybody even raises an octave to you, you're feeling attacked. You got to stop and take a step back and think, okay, is that me? Or was she actually being assertive or aggressive? And take a look at those two. Because a lot of times when I've mediated a harassment suit or claim, it's because somebody has used the word that they have been aggressive to me and it was just assertive. But because they are hypersensitive, it came across as aggressive. But they don't know that. Not everybody knows your personal history. So they don't know what you're sensitive to and what you're not. Same as the person that, talked about the swear word. I'll use an instance of a religious term. Sometimes when people get upset or mad, they'll scream out Jesus Christ. Now, to people, they may not think that there's anything wrong with that. Meanwhile, somebody that you've worked beside for 10 years just cringes when they hear that because it does impact them. But if that person doesn't tell you that that word that you say is having an impact on them,
mhm.
people go through 10, 20 years of working together and never know what they're doing is offending the other person or the other person is feeling attacked by it.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. It's kind of these shoulds, right? Like, people shouldn't say that or shouldn't do that, or people should know what bothers me. Um, and sometimes we don't even know what our own personal triggers are. So those little things that annoy you or set you off and you don't necessarily know what's going on, right? Why am I so bothered today? So that self-awareness piece. And we can't get to that unless we're willing to really figure it out.
Yeah. And it doesn't just have to be language that people are seeing
Mhm,
the difference between assertive and aggressive. It can be like physical movements. So, in one of the cases, the individual said, just waved her arm and said, I want to see you in my office. And then there was physical assault charged against them in the workplace. Now, when we got into the mediation, it was found that this individual was a victim of spousal abuse, and that always was the movement that would start the fight. So the manager has no way of knowing because we don't disclose all of this information.
mhm.
After the fact of them having the conversation, the manager said, I will never use that you know, hand signal again. Now that I know that, but I didn't know that before. So again, it can be physical or it can be verbal, but without the awareness piece, it's really hard to guess at everybody's history.
Yeah, awareness on both sides, right?
Yeah,
Awareness on the
yeah,
individual to be able to say, "Yeah, I know where that's coming from. I know that it is."
yeah.
and then the other person to be able to go, "Oh, okay. Well, I can do without that that hand gesture, or saying that word," or I
Yeah,
mean, I think that's the beauty of mediation in some of these conversations is, well, what will work,
yeah.
right?
And the more you know your trigger, the more you know how to ask the person
Mm,
that they can alter it. You know, like it's not that I don't ever want to see you publicly. It's just when you have something to say to me, if you can keep your hands at your side. So, you know, you have to own your own triggers and how you respond to your triggers. But
mhm,
that's not saying you can't reach out to your coworker and your leadership to work with
mhm.
you on responding to your triggers.
Beautiful. All right. We have another question over here that was submitted. I want to make sure to get to. Um, there's another director on my team who's technically competent, but creates so much interpersonal drama that it's affecting everyone's morale. They steal credit, create alliances, and seem to thrive by stirring up conflict. His work is praised by the CEO, so he does not think that there's an issue. How do I protect myself and my work relationships without getting pulled into his games?
Yikes and yikes and yikes. Okay. um, yeah. It's unfortunate when you have to work side by side with individuals like this. I think that the only way is I use the term to beat them at their own game, but you're not going to play their game. So, what you're going to do is when your team has worked hard to complete a project, when they've implemented a new software, when they have their big gains, that it's your responsibility to shout out the thanks to them ahead of time. So to the CEO, you know, just CC the CEO and say, just want to give a big thanks to my team for completing this. You know, like Crystal, you did wonderful in gathering all this. Give credit where credit is due, but don't wait until there's that time that he's going to have the meeting later, or you know there's an awards ceremony, or there's something big that's going to happen to tie it all together. Make sure you give immediate kudos to your team, because how is he going to go to the CEO after and say, wow, you should have seen what I did, I got this together, and the CEO is going to be like, really? You know, like Crystal's already told her team thanks and for all their work, and they'll start to see.
Mhm,
CEOs are also not so out of touch that we think. It's just they don't do a lot about what they see. You know, they've got other big fish to fry, and if you don't say anything as a director, they'll think, oh well, you know, you're okay with it, even though they take credit and they know that they're taking credit for work they probably didn't do. So again, this is bringing to light that, you know, my team deserves the credit they are. Um, Behaviors, all you can do is voice your concern. If your team comes to you with concerns about um, downing morale because of behaviors, words, whatever they're using, that you take to your CEO and say, my team has brought some concerns forward.
mhm,
That's about all you can do. You have to empower the management and leadership to manage and lead as they see. And then you go back to your team and say, I've taken your concerns up the chain. Now I have to leave it with them, and they're the ones that will make the decision. Do they do something? Nothing. But the team in itself will either gain trust and respect for the CEO or lose it after they know that their concerns have been brought forward. If nothing is done,
mhm.
sometimes that's quite detrimental to the organization. But you, as their director, the only thing you can do is voice it upwards.
Cool. All right. So if you have any last minute questions, drop them in the chat here. I'll keep an eye on. But again, this is just, I would say, the start, the tip of the iceberg for advice, for questions. Again, these are all pre-submitted, so if you do have questions that you would like to have answered, let us know. We're more than happy to do that. Join our Skool community. So Skool with a K, skool.com / Korero solutions 8915. Hop on in there. We just launched it this week. 100% free community. Jeanette and I, like I was saying before, are going to be in there answering your questions like this to get you the advice that you need so you don't have to wait days, weeks, months, frustrated. It's open to everyone that's within a leadership position, so you don't have to hold a specific title. But getting those answers to these interpersonal issues that are happening so that they're not wasting your time. They are not wasting any more of your energy.
And Crystal, how can this be confidential? Like you had mentioned that there's a lot of confidentiality around this.
Yeah.
So if you can just say, how does that ensure someone's confidentiality?
Yeah. So this is a private community. It's not like posting all of your stuff over on LinkedIn. When you go up there, you can just set your username. So however you want that to appear. And then you can also just private message us in the community and we can get those answers to you as well if you do have any concerns about that. As always, like your confidentiality, making sure that you get answers without breaching that is hugely important. So if you have specific concerns, please reach out to us and we're more than willing to work with you to make sure that you can get the answers without jeopardizing your career, as sometimes people feel like they are by sharing this information.
And a lot of times we can give you a case scenario, wording to use, a skill or a tool that you can implement right away. I know I'll say in the last couple individuals that we're coaching, our first meeting, they were literally at breaking point. And that's, I think, where Crystal got this. And, within one session, which is 1 hour, the next session was what a difference in my world you've made. And it
Mhm.
was just hearing them, what they're struggling with the most, what's most important to resolve right now that would help you eliminate some stress, anxiety, have that conversation.
Mhm.
So, it's worth it. Well, it's free. So it's worth every cent you spend. But we can definitely give you, we're not going to send you off with a book that you've got to spend the next week. We
Mhm.
want to give you real time answers, real time solutions, real time tools to use immediately because we want the suffering to stop.
Mhm.
And what we've noticed is it's not because people are incapable, that they just don't have the knowledge. They don't have that one tool or skill to
Mhm.
approach it. And a lot of times we hear, how is that so simple? Why were we not taught that? Why is that not part of the management course?
Yeah.
We hear this constantly because how do you empower one human to another human to
Mhm.
resolve something? And sometimes it's simpler than you think.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, I'll be back on live on next Thursday at noon. Head over to that Skool community so we can answer all of your questions in there. Um, yeah. Have a fantastic rest of your week.
See you online or next month. Bye bye.